Hi, today I want to talk about the cost of war. Uh, it's really interesting. This week I've been talking to my students about the Texas Revolution. I've been trying to impress upon them about how much war cost, about how expensive it was for Santa Anna to move thousands upon thousands of soldiers north of the Rio Grande, and how costly it was for the Texans to defend their right to self government and their right to vote. So I found these three articles. One deals with the Battle of San Jacinto. It's written by General Sam Houston himself, the legendary hero of Texas. And the other two are courier responses that show different aspects of financial concerns immediately following the war. One showing the numbers of the Mexican forces, and it shows the changing economy. And the third part talking about the fears that America had that somehow the Texas Revolution would impact trade between Mexico and the United States. It's interesting to think about this, but when Texas won its independence, a third potential major power was brought onto the continent. And it was a definite game changer for the United States and for Mexico, which at that point began their shrinking back down to its modern borders. Let's begin. First of all, this official report by General Sam Houston is outstanding. He goes into a lot of detail about the numbers of the soldiers, the disposition of the forces at the time of the battle. He does talk about how the battle was short, but they continued pursuing the Mexicans until twilight. At the very end, he says something pretty interesting I want to focus on. He says here about 600 muskets, sabers, and 200 pistols. I love that he counted, have been collected since the battle. Several hundred mules and horses were taken, and near $12,000 in specie. So if you take $12,000, put in an inflation calculator, it's roughly equals up to $450 million in today's money. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of wealth that was captured from the defeated Mexican forces. Sam Houston ends his correspondence to the governor of Texas at the time by saying he's great. He gives tribute of our grateful thanks from that being who rules the destinies of nations. This really deistic language reflects where Sam Houston is in his spiritual journey. He will become a Christian later, but as of right now, this is just, deistic platitudes, thanking the supreme being. But it's interesting letter. I like Sam Houston. I'm a fan of Sam Houston, and I grew up hearing about the Battle of San Jacinto. So to think about its financial aspect and how the Mexican forces lost $450 million worth of equipment is wild. And to see that that was such a concern and such a cause of joy for the Texan forces in 1836 is really interesting. The second article deals with the numbers of the Mexican forces. This was published in New Orleans by May 23rd. So it's about a month after the battle. And it's interesting at this time how they're still trying to confirm what's true and what's not true after the battle was won. They do talk about the retreat of the Mexican forces. They claim that the Mexicans had about 7,000 forces that crossed the Rio Grande. That seems a little high to me, but I wasn't there, and neither was anyone else alive today. But if we do assume it was 7,000, that does make sense because there was a force under General Costs. Santa Anna had two forces come up with him that went ultimately to San Antonio and then Gonzales after the Battle of the Alamo. And there was a third force under Herrera, and there might have been one more as well. So 7,000 doesn't seem impossible, but it does seem really expensive. And I can see how Mexico would not financially recover if their army had lost so much equipment and prestige and time and resources, dragging these men up across the Rio Grande for what ultimately came to be a fruitless war. There was no benefit. There was no cost. They did not retain Texas, and they even lost territory to the Texians with the Treaty of Velasco. The third one is really interesting. This is the one that deals with the $266,000 that came back on a ship called the Louisiana. Louisiana was a trade ship, and Americans were concerned that the Texas independence and the Texas War would disrupt trade between United States and Mexico. So one thing they saw as something significant is that the trade ship Louisiana brought back $266,000 in trade, which is roughly $9 million in today's money. That's a lot of money for a trade ship, and you can see why these vessels would be, right prey for pirates and plunderers as well in that region. And you can see why the Americans would be so concerned that they don't lose that trade because of Texas's war for independence. Interesting line here at the bottom. I'm going to highlight this one as well. We believe that the Mexicans are sick of Santa Anna and would willingly acknowledge the independence of Texas to get rid of him. The Mexicans would be sick of Santa Anna. He had crushed revolts at Zacatecas and other places. He was pretty violent to his own people as well. And I like how this one ends up. I'm going to scroll up to the very top of this page where we see the end of this article. And it's interesting because in this letter it ends with Sam Houston resting in New Orleans, recuperating from the battle, and with people flocking to him to come hear the tale. So it ends with this very heroic image of Sam Houston. Even though there's cause for concern with the war, ultimately you get the sense in their tone that the United States is pleased that Texas is pulled away from America. And they're also pleased that secession from Mexico did not disrupt trade. War is expensive.